I have more paper now than before the iPad.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
It just seems that way. Just put it in a notebook.
It's now 7 p.m. on Tuesday, June 6, 2017. I'd like to call the Selectmen's meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next would be public forum, limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. Is anyone here for public forum? Next on the agenda is the Board of Selectmen minutes from May 16th, 2017.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the Board of Selectmen's minutes from May 16, 2017 as presented.
I'll second that.
The motion has been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Wouldn't Ray have to abstain?
Oh, I'm sorry, 4, and then 1
And Mike
abstention.
wasn't here, so yeah, 3-0. 3-0-2.
3-0-2. Next would be, on the agenda would be the Selectmen's reorganization.
Do we have a nomination for chair?
Yes, we do. As chairman, I would like to make a nomination to have a new chair, Jesse Lomanic, as chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next would be the vice chair, and I would like to,
I'd like to, if I may, make a nomination to nominate John Hebert to the position of vice chair.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And third would be for the clerk's position on the Board of Selectmen. I'd like to nominate David Hall.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Now we have
So before we change the seats as now your past chairman, I would like to say a few words, if I may. It's been a privilege to serve the residents in Sutton, as well as my colleagues here, to come to these meetings and have the type of administrator that we have. He'll probably get mad at me, but he makes our job easy because he's so thorough and so professional. I feel in many ways this town, the town of Sutton, we're ahead of the curve. But it's not the work that we do. It's the department heads and how they run their departments. They all deserve a lot of credit because everything just, it runs. We don't hear a heck of a lot of complaints. Up here, we have to make some hard decisions from time to time. And we've done that over new contractors at the school and other things. But we always get through it because we got a very professional Board of Selectmen, and I'm very proud to be one of those members. As I step down tonight, we are certainly going to be in very good hands with the nominations that were appointed and elected tonight. So without further ado, I'll turn the meeting over to our new chairman, Jesse Lomanic. Good.
Name tags?
Oh, here, right there.
Yep. Jesse name tag?
Yep. That's yours, yep. Thank you very much. If it's all right with my colleagues on the board, I would like to, my first act as chairman, I'd like to switch the agenda items around a little bit, because I have a feeling that there are a couple individuals in the audience tonight for one item that we have a little lower on the agenda. So if it's all right with everybody, I'd like to start off with agenda item number 4, which is ratification of a new police sergeant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here tonight for the board to ratify my appointment of Lisa Sullivan as the new sergeant for Sutton Police Department. She went through an extensive process, as did a number of other individuals, officers. A thorough assessment center that I'll let the chief talk a little bit about. And I participated in an interview with the chief and a couple of residents of town. Pat Morris was one, and Maureen Veronique was another, and they were terrific, and I appreciate their help. But in the end, Lisa was the top scorer on this process, and I'm proud to present her to the board for ratification. The chief and Lisa, if you want to stand up and.
Good evening, thank you. If I may, I'd like to just speak real briefly, and given the magnitude of tonight, I think you're going to have to bear with me a little bit, because I'm going to get on the police soapbox for a bit. First, I wanted to talk about the process that we went through to get here tonight. And many of you may have caught some bits and pieces of it over the past few years about the open police sergeant position we had. It goes back almost 5, or actually 6 years. We've held the open position. So this year we finally put it in motion. We developed the policy that the department was in agreement with regard to how promotions are going to be considered for this position, as well as the positions in the future. And basically, the policy lined out required years of experience, what methods would be used to provide testing, whether it would be just a written test or an assessment center. Also, additional instruction that we would have the candidates undergo after these assessment centers or tests. And we developed that policy and implemented it, and subsequently hired a company to implement the process. The company came well recommended. I would say out of, I probably spoke to over a dozen police chiefs about how they conduct their promotion processes, and I would say probably 7/8 of them use this company in addition to another company that competes for these positions, as well as far as subcontractors. We decided to hire public safety consultants out of Wareham, and they developed a test in addition to several exercises where the candidates undergo, I would call it a strenuous activity or assessment center that's geared specifically towards the town that they're going to be working in. So I had extensive conversation with the consultants with regard to our community, our policies and procedures, our rules and regulations, and basically things that we do on a day-to-day basis here at the police department. You know, and obviously you can appreciate that we would be much different than, say, Worcester or Framingham or one of the bigger communities. So the process was actually geared towards the town of Sutton. They came in one day, gave a written test, which, by his own words, the gentleman who runs the company said that the candidates did extremely well on the written tests. They were separated by no more than 2 points in the written test. And, you know, it was good to hear, and his words were, obviously, they put some time into this, is what he said to me. So going into the second day, this was a 2-day process. They had 5 additional exercises, which they put the candidates through. I didn't see the exercises. I don't know what they were. I caught some conversations later on. It sounds like it was typical calls that we would go on, but it also sounded like there really wasn't going to be a right answer, regardless of how you presented what you would do. So, to say the least, at the end of the day, the candidates were scored on the 6 exercises, and Lisa Sullivan came out as the top scorer. Before we go into anything else, I wanted to speak real briefly about, well, not so brief, but I wanted to speak about the candidates that took or participated in the process, because I think to a certain extent they're owed some recognition tonight as well. There were 4 candidates that went through the process: Lisa Sullivan, Christopher Avey, William Jakes, and Joe Fortunato. Now, before I get into that, I just want to briefly talk to you about, and I know some of you have some experience in the police world and the police atmosphere, but in my opinion, it takes probably about 10 years for a cop to learn to do the job. And I say that, I mean, really, you can learn to do the job in a year or a couple of years, but to really get it, and I say get it, quote unquote, you're probably looking at anywhere between 7 and 10 years. And you know, it's a real irony, because when you're new and you're eager, you don't get it. And it's not till later on in your career when you get it, you know, and obviously, like many of the jobs that you people have, you don't have as much energy and you might not be so thrilled with the job that you're doing. But, you know, after 10 years, you actually get it. And in my opinion, you become a police officer. And you know why you're a police officer after that length of time. Now, you could almost go your entire career as a cop and be a pretty good cop with just doing the bare minimum, you know. I think you could probably retire with a great reputation and a great name for yourself if you just did that. You went into work, you did what you were supposed to do, you showed up when you were supposed to show up, and you did your job. And that's all it takes. There's a big step between being a good cop and a great cop. And I think a lot of that step is involved in the 10-year period that I explained to you. That's where you learn to be a great cop. I'm happy to say that the 4 people that went through the process are great cops. Hands down, great cops. Unfortunately, we had one position. And, you know, I sat after the test and said to myself, please don't do this to me. This is going to be a tie, you know? And you know, obviously, because we have to have some type of, you know, decision on it. Included in the process was a second panel interview that myself and 2 citizens and Jim Smith took part in. And we tried to keep that as anonymous as possible. And how we did that was we posted something on Facebook and said, we're looking for somebody to help us out with a promotion process. If you're interested, send me an email. I had about a half a dozen emails. And I vetted out 2 people because they had some prior police experience, and I didn't think that was fair. And we ended up with the 4 people, myself, Jim Smith, Maureen Barrique, and Pat Morris. And prior to them even agreeing to take a part in the process or letting them know that they were part of the process, I asked them, just submit me 3 or 4 questions that you think are relevant to a police officer's job in Sutton. And I probably got 24 or 25 questions out of the 4 people. And we chose 5 of those questions and ran them through the candidates through those 5 questions. And it was clear that, to me at least, that we had 4 great police officers. It's hard because it seems like the job works backwards in a sense where you don't really get it until later on in your career. And I say that with sincerity because, I look back at our younger days and you probably did your job and you had fun, but you didn't really get it. And Chief, I'm sure you can acknowledge that as well. Yesterday, Ray, the day before, we were talking in conversation about just some general things in town, and you made a point that actually I was going to use tonight. And I think one of the greatest assets of a great police officer is just being a good person. I mean, it all starts there. And if you look back at the way we hire and the way we're trying to do things here in the police department, that's our number one foundation. We're looking for a great person. And certainly all the candidates that went through this process are great people. And ultimately, at least in my opinion, have achieved the status of being a great police officer. So I think I'd like to at least acknowledge them publicly for the great job that they did. And I can tell you, as a police chief and as a person, that I know they put a ton of time and effort into it. I know they did. So, it's with great respect that I think they all finished within a few points of each other. So this brings us tonight before you is, well, I guess it's Provisional Sergeant Lisa Sullivan. She came to the Sutton Police Department in December of 2011. She had worked 13 years prior in the Littleton Police Department, where she was a sergeant for a number of years in the Littleton Police Department. She has done a lot for the department with regard to, extra efforts. And I'm certain most of you, if not all of you, are aware of our Facebook page, which I will tell you right up front. I don't know, what would be the best word to use that? I probably denied that Facebook page for 6 or 8 months, but just because at the time it was a law enforcement hot potato. It was like, you don't get into that. You don't let anybody know what's going on. And it's just, that's how it worked. And she was very persistent with me. And we need to do this. We need to do this. And we need to do this. And, finally, I just got sick of dealing with her. I mean, literally. And here we are, 4 years later? Or, with whatever, how many friends we'll likes or whatever we have on it, or I don't know. 8,000 friends. I only got like 2, So, in a joking manner, I think you can understand that was something that I was in agreement with, and I think her persistence and certainly her persistence in actually conducting the business on the page today is what makes it so popular and such a great asset. I don't think there's a week that goes by where somebody's like, "Oh, that's you guys put all that stuff on there," and I'm like, "Yeah, thanks." It's like I very rarely have any interaction with it. So she's also organized the civilian junior police academy, which we ran at the school for a number of years. She was active down the senior center, and these are all things that I'm certain I don't need to tell you, because if you've been out of your house at all and you live in the community, you've certainly seen some of the stuff that is a result of her actions. She has a master's degree, pretty well spoken, and certainly a good worker over at the police department. So with that being said, I would, along with Mr. Smith, request your ratification of Officer Lisa Sullivan's appointment to sergeant tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. As is customary, we give everyone at the board an opportunity to speak, and we do it based on seniority. So I'd like to start off with John.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure having Lisa here tonight. And Chief, you did a heck of a job explaining to the community on how the process is and everything, because the last week or so I said, gee, the 4 candidates that are running for this position, I wish we had 4 sergeants we could put on, because a lot of respect to all the other people, but you had to do it a certain way, and there was no favoritism. Everything was done by the book, and Lisa, congratulations to you, but one thing I am going to say, I'm going to miss you at the school as a resource officer, because you did a job there that a lot of people couldn't do. And all the kids, and I hear from some of the parents, that you'd get right down to their level, even on your knees, and speak to those kids. And the kids would go home and be excited with the parents and stuff. And, Officer Sullivan did this, and Officer Sullivan did a lot of this stuff. So keep up your work. And Dennis is right. And not that I meddle in the police department business, and I'm kind of proud about that. Matter of fact, the door is locked in the little entryway, and when I open up the door, a lot of times I say, "Do you still let citizens in?" And the chief has heard me say that many a times. But he says, "Boy, she's a go-getter, and she does everything very professional." So I know that I'm pleased, and I'm sure the other colleagues here are also. Thank you.
Chief.
Thank you, John. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, first of all, thank you for that explanation of the process. I think in today's world, process it matters, that everything becomes more professional over time, and you have to do things a certain way. And so I think for the community to hear the depth at which the process went to and how seriously and professionally it was done, I think will give the community a good feeling about how we got to this decision. So I appreciate the explanation. And before I speak to Lisa particularly, I did want to ask one question, though. So you mentioned that the sergeant's position has been open for a long period of time. So what drove you to want to fill it now?
Well, and there are a couple of us in the police department that are on the tail end of our career. And, I know one of my critiques on my evaluation, at least this year and the year before, was, succession plans and things that, frankly, I hadn't thought of and I haven't done much with. And I think, in general, I think it's a great foundation to start building some leaders from within the department. And, this is, in addition to the people that we have over there now, is certainly a better step towards that succession plan.
Great. Good answer. Thank you. I guess the first thing that I would say is that from this position, from this job that we do, all of the interaction I have with your department is always positive, that you have so many good officers over there that present very well for the town. So when you have a position like this open, the opportunity to fill it from within is really a good thing. And so to have such a detailed, objective, independent process that will put forth a candidate from within, I think, is a great result. So I'm really glad that it's going this way. And I guess fortunately, I don't have to interact with. I don't have the opportunity to interact with police officers all that often. But for some reason, Lisa seems to be at a lot of things that I end up at. So, for example, over the last few years, the Lions Club, the Lions Club thing over at Waters Farm every year. You seem to be over there, and so we get to interact a little bit. And so your comment about having a very personable, nice person, I can attest to that personally, that you have that in this person. And so I am very pleased to be able to agree with your appointment as sergeant. So congratulations. Thank you very much. One other thing I want to add, that in the last day, we realize how difficult this job is. Just a reminder of how difficult the job is. And so it is, it's just great to know that we have so many professionals that want to do this job and want to be here for the public. So thanks to you and for the whole department.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Dave. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for coming tonight in front of us. And, first, thank you, Chief, for explaining, like Selectman Hall had mentioned, the process. so people back home could also learn that there was there was independent, it was a process, because the fact that, as Selectman Hebert had mentioned, the candidates were all great candidates, and to be able to choose, I'm sure it was really hard to choose on which one to move forward. To you, Lisa, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
After hearing more and more about, where your career, being a sergeant, moving forward, knowing the things that you do in the community, along with things outside, seeing you at different events also, being a member at the Lions Club also, seeing you around town, it's definitely it's a great decision. It's a privilege to have an officer like you being promoted to sergeant. So thank you very much for your time and, the responsibilities that come along with it, being able to step up, as Chief Toll had mentioned. Some officers go through their career and they're happy where they are and that they're content. And it doesn't make them bad officers. It doesn't mean that, they don't want to serve and protect like every other officer out there. But others, like yourself, want to promote yourself and move forward to be able to take more of a leadership role and take your lessons that you've learned along the way as a police officer, along with what you bring in your knowledge to teach others along the way and guiding them and supervising them. So thank you very much for stepping up
Thank you.
for the position itself in the first place. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mike. Ray?
Well, it's an honor. First night for myself being a selectman, so this is a big honor for me to be able to sit in front of you. And thank you, Dennis, Chief, for your explanation as well. To the point you made about being a good person, Lisa, I'm fortunate to know her outside the police department as a citizen, and I've grown to really understand what she's all about, and I realized that she has a bigger heart than the badge she has on. So what I learned as part of my relationship building with her was the kindness that she shows and the care that she has for other people. To go deeper than that, my daughter, as you know, my daughter was a student at the school till she aged out at 22 this past January. Lisa took her under her wing and built an amazing relationship, but not only with my daughter, but with the other students there. And what I've heard from other parents and students alike is the community relationships that she's built, and young women, young boys looking up to her, maybe to be the next police officer someday, down the road. But the care that she showed them, the chief mentioned about getting down on the knee and getting to their level and understanding, that takes a lot of work. Not everybody can do that, cop or no cop. It's difficult to do, to get down to someone's level. So I appreciate the fact that she stepped up and wanted to be a sergeant, and the fact that she is then going to be the next sergeant. I'm looking forward to this relationship. And so to you, Lisa, I say congratulations. I think you deserve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Well, as chair, I get to speak last, but before I say my comments, I was wondering if there's anything you'd like to share with the community.
Well, I have to also acknowledge, like the chief did, the other candidates that were in this process with me, because if it wasn't for them, they wouldn't have kept me on my toes, because I had to try and figure out what were they going to be studying, what were they going to be doing, what were they going to be preparing with, and quite honestly, they helped me get to this point. So I have to give kudos to those guys as well, because they kind of fueled my fire, and so I would be remiss in not acknowledging that. As far as the school, I'm not going to say a lot because I don't want to get emotional, but I think that of 20 years in doing police work, that was probably the best job I ever had. I don't know that it'll ever be topped. I guess we'll wait and see. But there's something about interacting on a completely different way of police work that's very rewarding. And I don't know how, but those guys all worm their way into my heart. So we'll leave that alone. I'm looking forward to getting back onto the road and being a police officer again on the road. And quite honestly, it's been a couple of years since I've been down at the school, so I'm looking forward to learning from the guys that I will be working with side by side. And I'm just looking forward to that. So that's pretty much it, and I thank you for taking your time tonight.
Thank you very much. Well, A lot of kind words have been said. I'm trying to reflect on the words that I've heard in speaking to people in the community about yourself. Tough, fair, kind, compassionate, and community-oriented. I think if I was to describe you, I think that's the best way to do it. And I personally feel blessed that my first act as chairman is to have you before us for this presentation. So, again, I don't really have much to add. I think my colleagues spoke well. I would like to congratulate you. But before I do so, I would like to entertain a motion from my colleagues about something that we're going to remove the provisional status and make it permanent, if that's all right with you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to ratify the appointment of Lisa Sullivan to the position of sergeant in the Sutton Police Department.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. It passes 5-0. Congratulations, Sergeant Sullivan. And much to your chagrin, I believe it's appropriate for a couple of pictures to be taken.
The pinning, yeah. Swearing in.
Prior to that, though, I have a double role tonight, and I'm acting in as town clerk. I just have to swear her in. So I would ask her to face the crowd. So this is a Kodak moment, guys. Raise your right hand.
Oh, hey, wait a minute,
Gotta
wait a
wait for the
minute.
press.
Okay? Point the cameras here and repeat after me. You swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties incumbent upon you as a sergeant for the police department in accordance with the bylaws of the town and the laws of the Commonwealth.
I do.
Congratulations.
All right. Nice job.
Sorry, I might be,
Thank you.
This way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whatever you want to do. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yes. Take a minute. wife used to fit.
All right, if we could continue. Again, just juggling things around, if it's all right with my colleagues, I would like to move ahead to agenda item 6. If that's possible?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is actually a late addition to the agenda, which isn't typical for us. We don't typically do this, but this is a request from Pleasant Valley Dentistry. Therese Suzienka has come in and asked for a one-day beer and wine license for her facility. She's going to have an open house this Thursday night from 5 to 7:30 or 5:30 to 7 to hopefully welcome some new patients into the practice. So I thought it was appropriate to bring it before the board tonight and hopefully get your approval.
Dr. Suzienka, if you'd like to come up to the mic and introduce yourself to the community.
Well, thank you very much for the late addition. I apologize for a little bit of chaos if I may have caused that.
No problem.
Yesterday, so I thank you for that. Well, I'm very happy to be part of the Sutton community. My husband's family is located in Northbridge, and this is kind of a great area for us to set up our roots. As you guys may or may not know, I opened a dental office in the Market 32 Plaza just over 2 months ago. Things have been pretty good so far. We're having an open house this Thursday, and I am hoping to welcome people in. And as you may also know, for a lot of people, coming to the dentist is a very anxiety-inducing thing.
No.
So, you know, there's not a whole lot of incentives in my thought to get, you know, potential adult patients to come in the door willingly for a social event, which is why I thought it would be a kind gesture to offer a glass of wine or a beer to you know, people of the community who want to just take a tour and meet me, ask me some questions, meet my staff, and go from there. So we wouldn't be selling alcohol. There would be, you know, obviously no heavy intoxication. It's a very short event. So that was really my request from you guys, if that's something that you're able to grant.
All right, thank you. John?
Yeah, thank you. I'm in full support of something like this because it's good for us as the licensing authority to reach out to the business community and anything that we can do to promote that, and we've done this in the past for other places, so I think it's a good thing. The only question that I have, Doctor, is there fluoride in the wine?
No, there's not.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, John. Dave?
So the other question that came up was whether this is like a substitute for Novocaine, but, you know.
You drink enough.
Yeah. So I'm hearing the ghost of our former member in my head, and so I just want to ask a couple of questions. How do you intend to serve this?
So my wonderful, my husband's grandmother, Stasia Suzienka, she's a lovely old Polish woman. She's offered to come help me, just, you know, pouring a couple little plastic cups of wine for people, and we have a little beverage container that's normally filled with water for our patients, but we'll put some beers out in there and, you know, keep an eye on things.
I mean, it feels like a really low-key event.
Yes.
So, of course, you just need to be careful about
Sure.
What you serve.
Absolutely.
But I agree with John that an opportunity to promote a local business and do something for you to help you bring in some new business is a good thing. So we wish you success in your event as well as overall for your practice.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All set? Oh, no.
Nope.
More people. I'm sorry.
Mike?
Easy ones. Thank you for coming in front of us tonight, and I'm all for it. Couple questions that I do have. Do you have a clientele list? Were you operating out of another place before, and your past clients are going to come? Do you expect how many people around? I know you said it's open to the public, but
Yeah, it is open to the public. I mean, we've you know, we've given some invitations out to a few local businesses and gotten a small RSVP list. I really have no great idea of how many people we'll get. My estimate is somewhere between 25 and 50.
oh, excellent.
If it's more than that, we may not have enough, you know, beer and wine to give to everyone. So.
You know, again, as my colleagues had mentioned, I'm 100% on helping promote a business in town to generate more business to be successful. So I wish you the best of luck. And another question, did you practice somewhere else and you're moving here, or is
I
it your
did. I was
first?
in Whitensville for a short period of time a few years ago. Left there. I've been up in Fitchburg, Mass. for the past
Okay.
few years at a family practice up there. So
Who do you refer your orthodontic patients to?
that's a difficult question. There's a lot of great orthodontists around who.
My wife is in the industry, that's why I was just asking.
Oh,
but
really?
no.
Oh, that's a setup. That's a setup.
I had to.
Glad I didn't answer.
If by any chance he is watching at home, by any chance at all, then I would have been hung if I didn't. Tonight I may have food when I get home, so I did have to ask.
That's fine.
All right. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mike. Ray?
Welcome. Welcome to the town. I wish you the very best. I'm on board. I think my colleagues have asked all the questions that I would have come up with. But again, I am in full support. Anything we can do to promote new business in town, especially a dentist, a doctor's office. I look forward to seeing how you succeed going forward.
Thank
So,
you.
Good luck.
Thank you, Ray. Well, I think the board has it. Again, we've done this in the past, so this isn't the first business to come before us, and we have definitely been accommodating to such requests because it's good for you. The more clientele you develop, the better it is for your business, and, indirectly, it's better for the town. So I am, I think, agreeance with my colleagues in full support of this decision, and I wish you all the best luck in the world. But I'm not going to be visiting. Most of my teeth are already lead, so
Thank you very much.
you're quite welcome, quite welcome.
Motion?
Yep, yeah, I'd like to entertain a motion, if I may.
A motion on the floor to approve the one-day beer and wine license for Pleasant Valley Dentistry located at 22 Galaxy Pass, Unit A, on Thursday, June 8th, between the hours of 5:30 PM and 7 PM.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0.
Thank
Good luck.
Best of luck.
Good luck.
you so much.
Use gas?
No, I don't.
Oh.
Sorry.
All right. It's another one. I'm still. It's bad.
Thank you.
All right, so I believe next up would be agenda item number 3,
Got it.
which pertains to the Sutton wine liquor license.
Thank you,
Jim?
Mr. Chairman. This is a situation where the Sutton Wine and Liquors, as you may recall, swapped their license with Market 32. Sutton Wine and Liquors had an all-alcohol license, and they swapped that license with Market 32. Market 32 had a beer and wine license only. So now Market 32 has an all-alcohol license, and Sutton Wine and Liquors has a beer and wine license. Sutton Wine and Liquors also sold their inventory to Market 32 for over $500,000. So as of, and we recall that Sutton Wine and Liquors failed a compliance check I think it was in the late fall, and the board granted them a one-day suspension of their license. The board asked not to have that one-day suspension during the holidays, so the holidays expired. But as of January 15th, give or take, the business was shut down, closed. There's a sign on the door now that says for lease. Roughly 5 months have gone by, and, I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention that the business has closed, and I wrote a letter to the owner of Sutton Wine and Liquors, Mr. Allard, asking what his intent is with this license. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 77, it is the licensing authority's discretion after a public hearing to rescind that license and put it back in the inventory of town licenses. There is no other beer and wine license available other than that one. It could be perceived, I think I've included this in your packet as well, as a so-called pocket license, where We've seen that in surrounding communities where places have limited hours in which they're open. In this case, we have a business that's been closed for 5 months. So when, I did write to Mr. Allard. He responded with a letter I think that you have in front
Yes,
of
it
you.
is.
And you can read it for yourselves, his response. But obviously, he's not ready to make a decision. I just present it to the board for your consideration. If you feel enough time's gone by, or you want to give him more time, but it is a license that is the last beer and wine license available, and it's currently being held by him. But it's up to the board as to what direction you want to go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has come up, and it's within our agenda, and I have a lot of strong feelings against what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I have mixed emotions. I'm very proud that this board, through Jim, we set up rules and regulations and procedures on how to do compliance checks. And Mr. Allard at Sutton Wine and Liquors had more violations than anyone else. And it's this board here that we wanted to be considerate to him. So we wanted a one-day closing. But we were very conscious of that because we want to be fair, because we're the licensing authority. So we said, we talked about it, we'll have them closed on a Thursday night. But I think I can recall we didn't want it around Valentine's Day, and we didn't want it around some other type of a holiday. So now he closes around January 15th. Never lets us know anything that's going on. There's a big for lease sign in the window. Inside the store, there's nothing there. It's all cleaned out. So now, credit to our administrative secretary, she's really on a lot of this stuff, on the licenses. She does one heck of a job when it comes time for the renewals, the packets, the procedures, and everything that goes out. Well, she follows up with the town administrator. So now we send him a letter, and for one reason or another, he can't come in. And so that's kind of troubling to me. Seems to me, if it was a license of this much importance, that he would have made every effort to be here to give us some type of an explanation. So now, as the licensing authority, we're going to, I believe it is through the statute, we have to offer him an explanation or a hearing. So we're going to send that out. I believe it's certified mail, Jim? Or a letter to
If
him?
it's the board's decision to hold a hearing, then I will do the proper
And
notification.
I would like to have that hearing. July, we're quite busy here, but I'd like to have that as soon as we can, sometime maybe in July or the first couple of weeks in August, and get going with this. Because even though there's not any persons per se that are looking for this license, I think it's a standard of our behavior that we follow a procedure, like other procedures that we've set up, that license should come back into the pool. And if he hasn't done nothing for 5.5 months and haven't let us know about anything that's going on, and now he can't come in here and give us an explanation, well, we'll follow the procedure. We'll send him a letter. We'll have a hearing on the thing. And after that, we'll see where the chips lie. But I would like to have the license come back to the pool. And then if he wants us have a beer and wine license somewhere else, then he can go through the procedure again. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In many ways, John, I think I would echo the things that you have said here. Reading the stuff in our package from the ABCC, the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission, They have obviously made an effort to try to clean up these kinds of circumstances where people have licenses and are not using those licenses. And to me, when I read this, it's very clear that their direction on this is that you shouldn't be able to have a license if you're not using it. So you're granted the license to operate a business in a certain manner. And if you choose not to operate in that manner, then you essentially forfeit the right to have that license. That's the way I read this. I read this almost more than an option for us as really a mandate for us to rescind that license if it's not being used. So, this may not be a completely legalistic reading of this, but the way I read it, that seems to be the message that they're sending. So, it's very evident at this point that he has closed that business and does not intend to operate at that location. And so, to me, this feels like a very short leash. I think he has met the requirements for us to pull that. I think it's appropriate for us to have control of that license here and be able to authorize another interested party down the road to use it. And I think to have it kind of floating out there isn't the right way. I think. So I would support having the hearing at the earliest opportunity, and I think the way this is written and the way I would want to do it is offer him the hearing, and if he doesn't show up at the hearing, then I think that's tantamount to forfeiting the license. And
Revoking it.
so, thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Dave. Mike?
As a committee, as, controlling the ability to hand out and to revoke, it's almost as Selectman Hall had mentioned, it's our duty. It's not even, we have to obey by. And I read it the same way, where it was like, this is something we not only should do, but it seems like we would need to do this. Selectman Hebert brought up a great point that there's not someone in the wind right now waiting to take this, but what type of issue may that bring up in the future? Whereas if in 2 weeks from now we don't have the hearing, in 2 weeks from now we haven't made a decision, and someone comes along and says, I'm looking for a license, and then we have it. Are we only doing it? It might be perceived as doing it because of the fact that somebody's now looking.
Right.
We're going to let them sit there. So I'm all for taking the procedure as soon as possible, giving them the option to have the hearing. If it's a no-show, then revocation of it and move forward. At the beginning, Selectman Hebert brought up the fact that we had multiple times since I sat on the board where we were fair. We gave every opportunity to redeem or to make right the policies and procedures he put in place without any success. So the track record itself, for me personally, as a board member and as the ability to hand and revoke is definitely something that I look at it, past track record of the opportunities that were there, along with the opportunity of the letter that went out to come today and explain. I think we have no other choice as a board but to move forward with a certified letter and hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Ray?
Having limited knowledge until tonight, I have some knowledge of the business closing, and I wasn't aware of all the circumstances that were brought forward tonight by Selectman Hebert. I would say that I'm on board with the hearing. I think it would be the best for all parties involved. Give him an opportunity to come and speak, and as everybody has said, if he doesn't, then we go where the law takes us. But I'm in agreement. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to have to agree with my colleagues. We would obviously be remiss if we made a decision tonight because all parties are entitled to due process. So I think filing proper notification, having a hearing would definitely be appropriate because after all, I'm looking at the statute and the statute's clear. Holders of any liquor licenses must do one of three things. They must operate the license on the days at the location authorized under the license, or they must basically file with the town that they transfer location, or they must transfer ownership of the license. So this inactivity, to me, is violative of Mass General Law, so I think it's definitely appropriate that we move forward to hearing and ultimately make a decision.
What you got going on that?
Should we settle on a date?
I'm not aware of the posting for a hearing. I think it's probably 14 days advertising in the newspaper, et cetera. So I will try for the second meeting in January, I'm sorry, July, January. Second meeting in July, which is the 25th, July 25th.
Yep, plenty of time.
It's possible I could do the 11th, but either the 11th or the 25th. But I'll know more tomorrow when we go through all the policies.
All right, thank you.
Do we need a motion for that, to request or
Sure,
set the public
I think that
hearing?
would be appropriate.
Sure, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to hold a public hearing to consider the cancellation of the liquor license of Sutton Wine and Liquors as soon as our calendar will allow.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. All right, next up on our agenda, it looks like the net metering agreement presentation.
If you can just give us a minute and.
Sure.
You know, what we've decided is to hold that PowerPoint presentation that we presented a couple of weeks ago. There were a couple of members that weren't here at that meeting. And I think there's just so much information that needs to be shared. So I want to redo this presentation. We also added a few slides, and we talked about the negotiation that we had over the last month or so with the seller of these net metering credits. So, give you a little bit of background. As soon as we set up this PowerPoint presentation, we'll get going. You know, I also want to just recognize Doreen DeFazio. She's, she was a real assistance on this whole effort, helped with this PowerPoint presentation, helped with meetings that were set up. You know, I go in 1,000 different directions, and she had me focus, and let's get this done. And so without her, I don't think we'd be here tonight talking about this. I really appreciate what she's done for the town and myself. So this is the start of it. We made the first presentation, we talked about net metering credits. I wanted to make the connection to the Green Community Initiative. We began a Green Community in 2011, and with the leadership of Mike Chizzy, who we all knew and loved, and he was committed to, if we could save money on electricity, as well as at the same time save the planet, it's a win-win situation. It's a no-brainer, as he used to say. And I think that's the situation we're in now. We have the opportunity to purchase these net metering credits, which will save money on our electricity, 30% off our utility bills, and at the same time support a solar array, a solar farm out in Spencer, Mass, that increases the solar power that's provided in the state of Massachusetts. So that's really a positive situation. It goes beyond the green community into supporting another solar farm in a different community. But it's all about, saving money on the one hand, but also helping the earth at the same time. So, next slide. We talked about this at the last meeting. In 2015, the town meeting voted to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a net metering agreement. For a term of up to 20 years, this deal is for 20 years. We are currently using net metering credits from our own system. It's a system we own. Down at Manchog Fire Station, we put, I believe it's 48 panels on the top of that roof. Manchog Fire is only opened part-time, when training or when there's some officers down there in the Manchog Fire Station. So ultimately, we produce more electricity on those solar panels than is utilized at the Manchog Fire Station. What we do is we net meter those credits to the Sutton Senior Center. We fill out the details are fill out a Schedule Z that essentially you're able to draw off the grid that net metering credits. So the senior center utility bill, electricity bill, went from $10,000 down to $5,000, all because of the solar on the Manchog Fire Department. So, and that's 100%. We own that system outright. So there's no third party that we need to pay. This system is a private party that we're purchasing these net metering credits. So we only get 30% off, and obviously the private developer gets the 70% to help fund this solar farm. So again, the net metering is essentially a system which solar panels are connected to the grid, which is similar to Manchog Fire Station. They are connected to the national grid, and surplus power is transferred onto the grid, allowing customers to offset the power, the senior center, to offset their power from the utility. So it's kind of a virtual situation, but it works, and a number of communities have already done this. We are looking to enter into a deal with Sutton Meadows Solar LLC for 1.9 million kilowatt hours in the WCMA district. We actually have two load zones in Sutton, the WCMA district and the SEMA district. WCMA is Western Central Mass, essentially. SEMA is Southeastern Mass. So they create these beautiful acronyms that, once you explain them, it makes perfect sense. So the sewer department, the senior center, et cetera, are all in SEMA. So they won't get the benefits of this. In WCMA, we have the schools, we have town hall, we have the highway facility, Wilkes Fire, et cetera. That's the majority of our load zone is in that particular district, and that's where we're getting the benefits of this. And what is nice, in my opinion, is I believe effective July 1, we will start receiving the 30% off on our utility bills. Many of the projects we looked at, Doreen and I had visits from a number of these solar developers wanting the town's business in the net metering credits, but these facilities hadn't been built. And ultimately, it could be a year and a half before they got built. We were recently dealing with one that was 7 to 8 months out, but it wasn't even sure that it was going to be done in 7 to 8 months. So now we have, and less than 30%. We're talking 20%. So we got a great deal. We had an off-taker and Spencer withdraw. Could have been a number of different reasons. Maybe their town meeting didn't support it or whatever happened. They withdrew and now created an opening for the town of Sutton to jump in there. We were working with a consultant, Orlando Pacheco, who kind of assisted us with this. So it is a positive situation. Current usage is 2.25 million kilowatt hours. We're purchasing 1.9, which is roughly 85%. You never want to purchase total 2.25 because that doesn't save any room for additional efficiency. We're doing a great job with our green communities. We're well beyond the goal of 20% reduction in energy. We've exceeded 30%. We're now at 35%. So that's huge, which means that there's probably very little additional savings, reduction in electricity that we can have, but I still want to leave some leeway just in case for new technologies, et cetera. But these are the facilities that will be participating as part of this contract. This is an old slide, but this is the potential savings for the schools. Now, the one item I need to mention is this is if we purchased 100% of the net metering credits. We're purchasing 85 to 90% of the net metering credits. So that 109 is a little high. Maybe it's more like 100 or 80 or 95. Ted Friend and I, Superintendent Friend and I have talked about budgeting very conservatively with this number. So right now he's planning on budgeting 60 to 70,000 in the school department, which is a huge benefit to the schools. It kind of helps them out and puts them in a very positive situation. But I don't want them to over budget and expect this money when a number of variables could happen. Maybe it's cloudy, we don't get the credits from our current panels on their roofs. A number of different factors could affect their electricity bills. So that's also not including the town savings. That's just the schools. The town hall, the highway, Wilkes Fire, also we will receive 85, 90% savings on 30% of our utility bills.
Just go back to that slide for 1 sec. I just want to, thanks, Doreen. I just wanted to write down 365. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and what you see is the numbers are very similar, ELC and elementary, and then middle school and high school. Those are actually, there's 1 meter for the early learning center and elementary. There's another separate meter for the middle school, high school. So those are actually 4 schools on 2 meters. That's why the numbers are very similar.
And can I just chime in for a second, just to clarify again, Mike, that the 365 is 100%, so it would be
Not 85%.
about 85% of that. And then if we figure it's not going to start exactly on the start of the fiscal year too, that if it's a good 8 weeks out, that number is going to lower a little bit the first year. So I think, Jim and Tad being conservative is a really good idea too this first year as we go into this contract.
Thank you.
These are the issues we discussed over the last 30 days or so with our attorney as well as the seller's attorney. A change in law provision at section 6.2 of the agreement. If the net metering law changes or is eliminated, we could lose out on the net metering benefits. Obviously, if the law changes, we won't receive the benefits anymore, but we won't be responsible for paying for the cost of those benefits. So ultimately, it's a wash at that point, and we can get out of the contract immediately. We went back and forth and eventually settled on that language. If the net metering law changes, it would probably be for prospective employees, future customers of net metering versus the 100 or so communities that are already doing net metering. So it probably wouldn't affect those like us who have already signed up for it. It would affect future participants. Change in rates, which is Exhibit B in your agreement. If the utility, National Grid, exceeds the floor price or goes lower than 9 cents per kilowatt hour, with distribution and supply of utility, which is currently at 17.5 cents, then we wouldn't be receiving any benefit from the net metering credits. The likelihood of this happening is infinitesimally small, but this is what attorneys spend a lot of time on, the very small possibilities. Our council did get the floor price lowered from 10 cents down to 9 cents. That was a major victory, I think. But ultimately what you see in a lot of these contracts is an escalator on the floor price. So it starts at 9 and goes up 3% every year until the 20th year. We got a frozen floor of 9 cents per kilowatt hour, which I think is a victory. Termination risk. This is the big one that we went over, which is Schedule 1 in your agreement. Liquidated damages, if the town breaches the contract, it is still responsible for the contract price. Town council didn't like this language, didn't want us to be responsible. I actually fought back a little bit on this and said, look, we're entering into a situation where town meeting authorized this, and hopefully we explained it pretty well at town meeting. The Board of Selectmen, after this couple of presentations, full disclosure, they are aware of the risks. If the town breaches this contract, meaning we no longer want to pay for whatever reason, we're still responsible for paying. And there is a schedule in the contract agreement that lays that out. In addition, though, if we do breach the contract, we still receive the credits. But we're responsible for paying them. I mean, so it's really a nominal. I don't know what the word is, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if we breach, we're still responsible for the cost, and we still receive the credits. So why did we bother breaching in the first place? So anyway, in the end, it's a very small risk. I doubt that the town will breach because the town is pretty reputable, at least in my last 10 years' experience. And I just don't see a possibility of this happening, but it's a possibility. So I just want to present it to you. Next slide. And finally, you know, this is an ECOS contract. It's a company out of Minnesota, is it?
Yes.
Savings should be received within the next 30 to 60 days. The site is already built. That is a picture of the site. Northampton is currently an off-taker of this location. And again, it's 30% savings to our current bill. So that's essentially the presentation. I did want to get that PowerPoint done again. Sorry for the repetitive nature to the board that already saw it. So,
I watched it.
did you? I'm sorry.
But there was still, it was good. It was still
Yeah.
good because there was
Yeah.
a couple that I thought there was no.
And there were some new slides. You know, the whole contract that wasn't in the first because we were in the midst of negotiating the contract. At that
What
point.
was the total usage again? 2.2.
2.2.
2.2. And okay.
All right, thank you for the presentation, appreciate it. John?
2.2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start with this, I want to acknowledge Doreen. I think if I can, my days are right. I think we've had her on board here in Sutton for 2 years, or a little bit over 2 years. And when she first come, it was a split schedule between us and Millbury, and so many hours here and so many hours there. And you just shouldn't take things for granted. I said, oh boy, Millbury has a lot of things, and she's going to be energized down there, and when she comes up here, we'll get what we get. But that's not the case, everybody. Doreen is very professional, very hardworking. The things that she does, not only on this, she's been very persistent with Jim, and to get all this stuff done. And you look around the town with the new streetlights, buying them all out and arranging all that thing. And she just comes to our meetings and she does her homework. And Doreen, you're very pleasant and fun to be with and very professional. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, John.
But
Thank
in
you.
regards to the net metering contract, Jim set a target date of tonight, June 6th, and with him and Doreen, they did a lot of conference calls in Jim's office, and didn't know if it was going to get all rectified with a lot of negotiations that went on for tonight, but to save the 30% and to save the school over $100, and now it's $109,000 per year, that's really good planning. It's good communication, and I know that Ted Friend is ecstatic about this agreement that we have. So, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Doreen. I'd say more, but these guys have covered it, so. Actually, I did want to say thank you for actually repeating this presentation and adding the things that you did. I think for the benefit of Mike, who did see it, but
Yeah,
certainly
it's
for Ray,
still- absolutely.
who wasn't here last week, and to have to sort of comment on this and vote on this, it's good to have the presentation repeated. And so I had a couple of questions, and it's actually a follow-up to something that came up at our last discussion about this, something that Jesse had brought up that as I gave it some thought, I guess I wasn't clear about. So we're buying the 1.9 million
Kilowatt, yeah.
kilowatt hours, and that's a percentage of their output,
Yes.
as I recall.
Yes.
And I think Jesse's question was, what happens when their output varies? So you mentioned the example of the fire station, and that the impact on our bill varies quite a bit because the weather or whatever circumstances come around to impact that. It impacts the generation of energy. So if you're thinking about 30%, it seems like, our share of that can vary along with the output of that. And so I was just curious kind of what that means if they produce more than their anticipated amount, or what that means if they produce less.
Well, I think there's a, they have more credits to sell than the 1.9. I believe it was 2.3 or 2.4 that they had available. And our capacity is only, in my opinion, 1.9. I know people could argue we're at the max of energy efficiency. We're not going to reduce our consumption anymore. We should purchase more. And they made that argument to us, and I said, no, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to put the town on the hook for that. And so we've limited our exposure. But if there's a lack of production from the solar array or farm, that could potentially affect the output as well, and maybe bring our number to lower than 1.9. However, that's why I've budgeted and insisted that the school department budget conservatively. Don't budget the actual number. Budget $20,000, $30,000 less than that number for those issues. This last year, we got great production from the solar panels on the Early Learning Center as well as the high school. But we didn't have a lot of snow days, and the panels weren't covered in snow a lot of the time. And that's part of the reason we got great production. A lot of sun, no snow, great production, and their utility bills went down. But that's a variable that is dependent upon the weather. And this solar farm is no different, in my opinion. Do you have anything?
Yeah, can I
Sure.
chime in a little bit? Another way to look at it is the solar panels at the fire station. We use anything left over for the senior center. This development is a business, so they're going to sell what they can give away with still making sure that they're still making out on the deal. And so if we were offered 2.3 and we took 1.9, the chances of us getting the 1.9, they're still going to make their money and probably then some. So that wasn't a concern when we went through the contract. And, as Jim had mentioned earlier, we've looked at several contracts too. I also wanted to make mention that I happen to have a conversation with another town manager today who was talking about net metering, and their floor price was, they didn't end up signing contracts, but 13, 14, 15 cents.
Wow.
And ours is 9. So we have to credit our attorney too for really being diligent and bringing it down to that 9 cents. That's a great deal.
Good point.
And I guess, thank you for that.
Sure.
I guess the last thing I just wanted to mention, when you first presented this contract to us, and the first time that I saw the early termination fee, it's a little bit disconcerting, I'll say. So after a little bit of discussion, I guess what I'd say is I appreciate that you bring it up openly in public meeting. I think it's worth talking about. And at the end, I'm certainly going to support this because I think this is a great thing for us to do. And even with that early termination fee, I guess I just circle around enough possibilities where I think that you just can't come up with a scenario really where you think you'd want to sort of back out of the contract in a way that would invoke this clause. But I think for public disclosure, it was the right thing to do to bring it up. So thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dave. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What out of a percentage does the school use compared to what we use out of the 2.1?
Roughly 85%. Because ultimately,
So, I mean, if we're using 2.1 as a town, what percentage does the school use of that?
we're using 2.225, and what's roughly the middle school, high school, and the elementary and early learning center use about 1.8 million kilowatt hours,
Okay.
and then you have the treatment facility, the wastewater treatment facility down there that brings up another 133,000 kilowatt hours. So, roughly 85% of all the, electricity is consumed by the school department.
So we're probably looking more like, as a town, $120,000, $130,000 savings overall.
Yes, max
And
ideal
that's being-
conditions.
That's still, because that's only saying the school is getting about $90,000 savings.
Yeah, I'm still conservative.
Still, all right, so we're saving over 100 as a town.
yeah,
That's being pretty conservative there, right?
yeah, I would say that's probably accurate. Not knowing what the next
Be
year is going to
conservative,
bring.
right?
Yeah,
Today, as of today, as we can speak today, 100,000 savings is, and we talked about bringing you on for more hours. We've made us $100,000 as a
yeah,
town.
yeah.
So you've paid for the next several years of your salary. I just thinking as a business, that's truly what it's done. Keep up the great work. So that's on your end.
Happy to do it.
The easy way to say it is thank you in that way, putting it to numbers too, but thank you.
I think what he's saying is we expect 100,000 a year.
Yeah, that's kind of, I didn't get there yet, Dave. I mean, no, I'm getting there, no.
Guys, the budget's done. All right.
So we look at 2.2 and change. If we were to exceed, we were to drop it down to what we're purchasing from them.
Yeah.
And we were producing more with our solar panels. Could we resell that back as a town to the electric company? Just out of curiosity,
no.
I didn't know if we could or we couldn't by law.
You can't. We can't do that, unfortunately. It's the way the law is set up. I have solar panels on my house. I can't sell it back to the utility.
Oh, you can't? I thought you used to be, maybe.
I never was able to. What I get is a credit.
Okay.
So I don't have an electric bill. I've got a $500 credit. And the credit keeps growing. And that's great. I can run my air conditioner nonstop. But,
in addition,
I tend to be,
black market
respective
to
of the
neighbor.
community and the
Environment.
greater idea. But so that is a flaw in Massachusetts, or it's a difference in Massachusetts. Some states actually allow you to sell excess power back to the grid.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Massachusetts doesn't have that. And there's a lot of benefits of doing business in solar in Massachusetts. The SREC, solar renewable energy credits that you get for having solar panels, right now an SREC 1 is $300 per quarter per SREC, which is 1,000 kilowatt hours. Other communities, Maryland has an SREC program, they're paying like $9 per kilowatt hour, $9 per SREC. We have a very high SREC price, but we also have some other issues, and that's they don't purchase excess energy from individual solar providers.
Okay. And lastly, with the termination, what was do you know what town council's big pushback? Was it just negotiating? Was it on the idea of they wanted us to be able to walk away?
Yeah, essentially, they wanted the town to have no liability. That's my understanding. That was the first attempt. And ultimately, I said, look, we're entering into a deal. Both sides put something forward. Mm-hmm. The seller's offering us 30% off our utility bills, and we're able to walk away from the contract with no harm done and just say, oh, we're not interested anymore. It just didn't seem fair on the seller's behalf. But I know town council tries to look at things in the town's best interest. He doesn't represent the seller, so he was trying to protect the town.
So there wasn't like a piece in there where he thought we should be able to walk. It was just protecting the town negotiating style?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't know if there was.
Do you have a
out
different
of
read on
curiosity,
that,
I
or
was.
is that pretty
No,
much?
I would say to Jim after every meeting with council that he's doing his job as an attorney. He's dotting his I's and crossing his T's and looking at everything through the lens of what's the worst case scenario, which is what we wanted him to do. My understanding is the wording still protects the town at this point, where if the town and the developer make the determination that we can't agree, there's 30 days and there has to be a written agreement, and then you can terminate the contract. Was that your understanding?
Yeah, but with the liquidated damages provision, ultimately, if we decide unilaterally to breach this contract and say we're not gonna pay
Right.
for this, ultimately, there isn't a 30-day provision. Ultimately,
Right.
we are responsible for a cost I was mentioning earlier, we still get the 30% off our utility bills. So it's almost like, why bother breaching the contract if we're still getting the credits,
almost
but we're
like-
responsible for paying anyway?
There is no out. It's almost like
Right.
this, we're getting the electricity. We bought 20 years, and they provided us service for 20 years.
That's the only thing that makes me a little nervous about this,
Yeah.
is it's a 20-year agreement. And that's because these solar farms are millions of dollars, and they need that income over time to be supportive of that. I feel much more comfortable with a 3 to 5 year contract. 20 years is a long time.
Do we know what, I mean, again, as Selectman Hall had mentioned, it's just that everything is it's almost like a no-brainer on this end. Do we know why the last town pulled out? Was it?
We don't even know what town it is.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
No.
All right, thank you.
No.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mike. Ray?
I
you.
wasn't sure.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for all the work, and also presenting it a second time.
Sure.
I appreciate the opportunity to see it. The only question I had, you're talking about a scenario to breach. What scenario can you possibly come up with where we would breach the contract? I can't think of anything.
That was kind of our point.
I don't recall what council mentioned as a possibility. Do you?
No.
Other than the length of the contract, I just can't see any other reason.
Or a better deal.
A significantly
coming
better deal.
along.
Better deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
the
so-
problem is, you're not going to get a better deal. In my opinion, and town council may have a different opinion, but ultimately, right now, getting 30% off is the best we can get. Most deals we were looking at were 20% off. Now we have a chance to get 30% off. SREC continues to go to SREC 2, SREC 2B, next is SREC 3, and the value of those SRECs continue to decline. SREC 1 right now is paying $300. SREC 2 is paying $250. SREC 2B, less and less and less. Ultimately, the state reached its goal of having more than enough solar power in the state. And now it's kind of taken on a life of its own. A lot of jobs in the solar industry, et cetera. They don't need this extra incentive of SREC payments to support solar power, because it's already taken on a life of its own, and the cost of solar panels have gone down to, 2 cents per kilowatt. Very affordable solar panels, which makes it, a no-brainer. So I don't see a situation where we will ever have a better deal than what we have before us. If we don't do this, then ultimately we'll probably have, if we decide to do net metering, probably have 20% off at best.
Good, thank you. I appreciate it again.
Sure.
I appreciate all the work, and I'm in full support.
Okay.
Anything that we can save money and be green, it works for me. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Sure.
Do you mind if I want to follow up on that question, actually? So
Sure,
just
be my guest.
considering those opportunities or those reasons why you might want to get out of the contract at some point, what happens if the electricity price does what you don't think it's going to do, but crashes? So now it's down below that floor price. What does that do
Then
to?
ultimately, we get out of the agreement. I believe there's 30-day notification. I think Doreen was
Yes.
mentioning that earlier. We don't save 30% off. I mean, it's interesting. We won't be responsible for paying any money to Solar, or Spencer Meadows LLC. And we won't be receiving 30% off our utility bills. What we will receive is 9 cents per kilowatt our electricity price, which means the price of electricity has dropped and our budgets have benefited from that.
But that still doesn't say you get out of the agreement. It just means you're.
It
Or-
does.
or do
There
you
is
get out of the
language in
agreement?
here that, if it drops below the floor price,
Yeah.
then we're not responsible for the net metering credits.
Okay. And so what happens if 2 years later the price rebounds or something?
My guess is if it drops below the floor price, this project becomes not supportive. I mean, it can't happen at that low rate. I don't think you'll get any investors to invest in a solar net metering project that the value of that project is minimal if electricity is below 9 cents per kilowatt hour. Because price is so cheap. I don't know, it just doesn't,
Yeah.
Could I add something to that? So that would be like the solar company taking an 8.5% hit on their price. So they'd be taking, if it dropped, that'd be 100% down. It'd be like they lost 100% of what they were making.
yeah.
Right.
Seems like they would fold.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see how it would be financially feasible for that company to continue.
Who would want to invest in that?
Ultimately, they'd probably let the solar farm and just go away or
Grow some hay.
abandon it.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening in the industry either. They could possibly be bought out 10 years from now or expand, but it's not an industry where I see them going out of business.
We all still need power.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I apologize for.
Yep, no, not a problem.
No, I said that was good.
Oh, all right, I didn't know if you were going to ask.
No,
Okay.
that was made me think of
All right, well, I'll put my law professor hat on for a minute, if I may, and I love talking about hypotheticals. One point that I want to stress to the community, if something catastrophic happens and the town was to breach the contract per se, it's not a criminal offense. Businesses make contracts and either party breach them all the time. And ultimately, one of the major reasons why it occur is because one of the parties are going to save significantly. But as has been stated, and I completely agree, granted I don't have a crystal ball, it is unlikely, I would assume, that prices would drop so much that it would be profitable in our benefit to breach such a good deal. I mean, 30% savings, regardless of the cost of electricity. I mean, that's huge, and that's money in the bank. So I think in that regard, I think we're safe, which leads me to agree completely to the point that Jim made about negotiating and having that contingency in there of the termination risk. Ultimately, that's a symbol of good faith. And, to get the best deals, both sides have to give up a little something to establish agreement. Because, again, getting my law professor hat on, if you have a one-sided deal, that's known as an illusory promise, and that's not an enforceable contract. So I couldn't imagine why the other party would want to bind themselves in agreement that one party could simply walk away from, because it would not be profitable and it would make no business sense. So based on the fact that town meeting endorsed the concept of a 20-year agreement, I think the fact that we willingly negotiated and bound ourselves under such terms, I think that's fair. I think that's definitely fair. And at the end of the day, has been said by my colleagues, we're saving money. So, as always, Doreen, and hopefully Bob can get the quote right again, because last week it was brilliant, or the last edition. Whenever you come before us, you are saving Sutton money. So needless to say, I love seeing you before the board. So thank you.
I don't do it alone.
I got to bring her
office.
before and something goes bad. I don't know if I'm going to think of that.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for your hard work. Jim, thank you for your hard work.
Not a problem.
All right, so it looks like at this point I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the purchase and sale agreement for net metering credits between the town of Sutton and Spencer Meadows LLC as authorized at the spring 2015 town meeting.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, it's Town Administrator's Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few updates for the board. Relocation of Precinct 3. The election obviously is over. We're processing how that went. Laura Caruso didn't find any issues. Felt that it went pretty smoothly. All the comments I've received so far are that the people in general supported the Wilkes precinct moving over to the middle school gymnasium. So, if the board has any thoughts, I appreciate your comments after the meeting or whenever. But in future, if things look good, then we'll probably continue to have Precinct 3 vote at the middle school gymnasium. Parking went well. There wasn't any major issues with the poll workers. Everything went pretty smoothly, so from that perspective. Marian's Camp Beach opening will be open daily from 12 noon to 6 p.m. from June 17th to August 20th, and the weekends of August 26th and September 2nd. Swim lessons will start on July 3rd and run Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. The last lesson will be on August 11th. The summer solstice triathlon will take place on Friday, June 16th. That's MRA that runs that annual sprint triathlon. Town Hall Cookout. We have an annual Town Hall Cookout. Will take place this Friday at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. I'd like to close Town Hall at 11 a.m. I think I mentioned that to the board in the past. The event will take place in the fire station, center station. The bays will be open. The trucks will be moved out. The board is invited to attend. It's a fun, quick event. We played. What did we play? Cornhole last year. Yeah, so it was interesting. Board of Selectmen goals meeting. We typically hold goals meeting at the end of July. This year, with July 4th falling on a Tuesday, the board meetings are the 11th and the 25th. So we typically have it on the last Tuesday of the month. Now we have a board meeting on the last Tuesday of the month. So the options for this meeting are July 18th or August 8th or any other day that the board can agree upon. Green Line Velo race will be held this Sunday, June 11th, from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. We have been through this before. They came before us in March. We did have one resident attend, expressing some issues. I think they dealt with that situation fairly well. We'll have to see how it all works out in the implementation. It is an issue. Obviously this road race takes up quite a bit of this part of town. But I think they donated $1,500 to the food pantry last year, and they do that on an annual basis. So that's a positive. One other update I have: the next board meeting. It's scheduled for June 20th. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'll be able to make it, and Selectman Hebert can't make that meeting either. I was wondering if the board would be able to move that meeting to the 27th. I very rarely request that, but the options are, you can continue to hold that meeting. I won't be able to be there at that meeting. I can try to make it a light agenda, but I just want to let you know about that. That's all I have for updates, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Jim. John.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to see Marion's camp will be up in operation, and it's a great program, especially with the swim lessons for the kids that want to go there in the morning, and the price is right for everything that they do there. Goals meeting, I would like to suggest and offer it to the board, my other colleagues, if we set that for August 8th, if everyone's in agreement after discussion here. I think July is getting quite filled up with other things, and if the opportunity is to have it on August 8th, I think that would be a good night. In regards to the Green Line Velo, we've had a lot of good conversations with them, and they seem to be players and listen to our comments and try to straighten out some of the things. And I just think them coming into town, it's good for us and it's good for them, because we haven't had a lot of things that have been negative, and they want to reach out to us and they want to have this here. And I think we can work out all the differences and welcome them to come in and do this race. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, thank you for the update, as always. I appreciate your wording here with the relocation of the precinct, in that it's something that you're sort of still vetting, because I think that's appropriate. I think, I talked to Laura after the election, and she said she heard no negative feedback regarding the change. Particularly what I was worried about were people showing up at the old voting place and not having it there, and just confusion and probably a little probably makes people upset. So that didn't happen. I think kudos to everybody for the communication effort that took place to let everybody know about that. I heard some concern about whether that may have led to a lower voter turnout from that precinct. Really as a convenience thing, because people typically would maybe plan voting around going to work or something like that, and where it's right in your neighborhood, it's easy to do.
Right.
And where now it's at the center of town, it might take you out of your way and make it more difficult to do. Now, I've not heard anybody say that as an actual reason to not vote or causing them not to vote. But I think it's worth continuing to look at and consider. Certainly the turnout at this particular election wasn't particularly high. So, in a presidential election, when you have a higher turnout, that just seeing how the facility works out, just, open for continued discussion as it goes on.
Yeah.
I had a great time voting there. It worked out fine for me. But
Good
I
point.
think continuing to sort of see what kind of feedback you get is the right thing to do. So, in regards to Marion's Camp and the Green Line Velo race, we have a very physically active update this time around. So that's nice to hear.
That's right.
I think to John's point, it's funny because looking at this particular thing, it struck me just how long a day that is for that race, knowing that the road is going to be shut down for quite a long period of time. So, I think the effort this year, as they've done in the past, to work with the residents in that area and to try to make the experience as good as it can be, given that you're closing down part of the road for a long period of time, it's good that they're doing that. I appreciate Mr. Gransdorf coming in and making a very reasonable discussion about the concerns that he had. I think that's the right way for both sides to do it. So, personally, August works better for me than July. So that date, I can do July if we need to do that, but August is just a better date. So that works for me. And I'm looking forward to the cookout. It was a great time last year, and hopefully the weather holds, and can't wait to go.
Yeah, cool.
And I can absolutely do the change on that meeting to June 27th if that works for everybody else.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Dave. Mike?
Thank you. Did we, just out of curiosity, was there a sign down at the fire station also saying head up to the school if they
Yes.
showed up there? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. Thank
Yeah.
you. Looking forward to Marion's Camp opening up. So when my kids say that there's nothing to do with their friends, we can send them there. And it's a great place. It really is. And year after year, it's just the changes to the camp itself
Yeah.
have really come along. The cookout, looking forward to that. I'm definitely up for June 27th. Not a problem at all here. My vote would be I'm okay with the change on that to accommodate
Great.
so that we can continue to keep our meetings in flow. August 8th is better for me also, seeing that July is getting pretty hectic along with the holiday in July and vacationing. Looking forward to the race. As Selectman Hall had mentioned, that they could come to an agreement or work something out. It was good that he came and presented that to us and the people that are organizing the race, because we noticed they were talking after, and hopefully they work something out in the hall to come to an agreement on something that may work for them if they do need to be somewhere on that date. And that would be it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am all set.
Thanks, Mike. Ray?
I look forward to Marion's Camp as well. My daughter, my kids spent a lot of time there as young kids, and I kayak Singletary, so I enjoy watching all the excitement over there and with the recent updates. It's really a fun place that we have in town. June 27th, I believe that'll work for me. August 8th should work for me. I'm looking forward to my first cookout.
There you go.
And I think that's all I have. I'm good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. All right. Well, I, like Dave, was impacted by the relocation of Precinct 3. It was very convenient for me before just to be able to walk from my house over to the station. Obviously, now I had to drive, had to ride behind the buses. I was very disappointed. I wasn't the first one from Precinct 3, which I typically am. I voted sixth, but that's all right. To me, I look it in terms of convenience versus safety. For the people in Precinct 3, obviously the location was very convenient. But as has been expressed by Jim multiple times, there were near safety incidents. No parking, lighting, crossing the street. The facility itself couldn't handle big crowds. I remember in presidential elections, making a line go from the office through the bays, wrapping around, going into KP's parking lot. If it was inclement weather, I wouldn't want to stand in the rain, even though I've never missed an election. It'd be kind of cranky. But at least at the school, it has a facility capable of holding a large turnout. So safety, parking all in one spot, and being undercover, I think it worked out. And again, I'm hopeful that once all the details have been ironed out, that this change will be permanent. But of course, I appreciate your willing to look at it. Because again, there is no perfect solution for everybody, but at least we're willing to accommodate the best we can. We'll be better off.
Okay.
Marion's Camp, wonderful, very excited. I would like to, again, highlight the fact that we have both the triathlon and the race coming in, two great community partners who always pay it forward, as it were. Yeah, you have the participants involved, and it's good publicity for the town, but they're respective of the community. They pick up after themselves, and they always give back, particularly to the food pantry. So very excited to have those events. The cookout, also excited about that. Hopefully the cornhole field will be level, but no complaints on that one. And in terms of the two changes, it looks like the overwhelming majority of the board consents to the change on the 27th and the 8th, so I concur with those moves.
Great, thank you.
Thank you again for the update.
Quick question, if I could.
Yes, sir.
The race that's going on in town, is it the same one that they were looking for volunteers last year from the Lions Club?
I believe that was the triathlon
Was it?
that they were
Okay.
looking for volunteers.
Thank you.
In years past, I think they've had the football team out. I think the Booster Club has helped out. So, yeah, I think the
Yeah, I
Lions
volunteered
Club was...
last year for that particular one. It was a lot of fun. With the folks that put it together, it was fun being involved in that.
Yeah, it is a good group.
Yeah.
I'd still like to put together a team, but
Yeah,
selectman team.
Team of one.
I'll give you an arm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Announcements.
I'll bring the chips. Will that get you guys there?
John?
I
Announcements?
have none.
Doritos?
Are we rolling all this together or just do announcements?
Well, do we want to roll it all in one? I'm comfortable with rolling it all in one.
You're the
So then
chairman.
we'll say announcements, roundtable, and correspondence.
So let's give John another chance.
Yep.
I'm fine.
That works.
I have a few things to say, if I could.
Sure, be my guest.
So the first thing is, I want to talk about Memorial Day, if I could. So I would just like to give an appreciation to our veterans in town. So you and I had the opportunity, along with some others, to travel around town in the annual event that the veterans put on to honor those that are in our cemeteries that served in our armed forces. And particularly myself as a non-veteran, to have the opportunity to do that and to read those names in some of those cemeteries is an honor that I really just can't express in words how tremendous it is to be able to participate in that event. So I'd just like to say thank you to those veterans that put together the event itself and for allowing us to participate in that. So I also wanted to thank Mr. Hebert for his service to this board as its chairman for the past year. It has been we've been in great hands. I continue to learn a lot from you in all of the things that you do, and you know, we don't talk about it a lot, but quietly, John does a lot of things that don't get talked about all that much, and provides a heck of a lot of good things for our board and for our town. And you know, I think especially now, being a lifelong resident of town, all of the things that you've done in your public life for this town provide sort of a foundation for the things that we do on this board. And I just want to say I appreciate that, and I appreciate the service.
Kind of you.
And Jesse, I want to congratulate you on position as chairman, and have great confidence in your ability and where your term as chair will lead us. So congratulations. Ray, I want to say congratulations to you as well. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
You know, just briefly, we got a chance last week last meeting to say goodbye to Mr. Maynard and thank him for all the service that he's done. And I share all of the same kind of confidence that I've expressed in you. I know that you're going to do a great job on the board. So
Look forward to learning from all of you.
You know, I also wanted to say that you know, my term was up, and I ran for re-election, and you know, and when it was time to make the decision about whether I really wanted to run again, and you know, so sort of now that I'm here, you know, I guess the feeling that I have is that it's just really a great privilege to be able to do this job. Sometimes, probably you've all experienced this, sometimes people say, why do you want to do that? It's such a thankless job. I have such an opposite feeling about that. I think the opportunity to be here and to serve the people of this town is just a great opportunity, and I'm really proud to be able to do it. And I just want to say, you know, thanks to everybody. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well said, Dave. Thank you. Mike?
You know, I'd like to feed off that a little bit. And, you know, again, thank John for the last year of his services as chairman. It's been an honor to sit with you on the board the last 2 years that I've been in. And welcome Jesse and congratulate him
Mike.
on his new position, along with the election of Selectman over here, Mr. Plant, or Selectman Plant, sorry, and Selectman Hall with re-election. But what I'd want to add to that is I heard something this weekend, and you say that, you know, you feel quite the opposite, and that's why I think we're here and they're not, is because it's not thankless to us. It's thankless to them. And, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger had said it that, you know, each and every person should give their back and their time back to the community in some way. To help out, whether it's through public services, through the military, through law enforcement, or even volunteering. And it made me really realize it when you said that. So some people think it's thankless. I've heard it in 2 years, never mind, you know, the time that it must be multiplied so many more times, term after term. But it is. I think that's why we're here and they're not, because to us it's not thankless. It's something that, you know, we're giving back, or I feel that I'm giving back my time and sitting here, and it is an honor, I think, to be here. Now to anything else to add to that for updates. Great time, Memorial Day. I had to do some bouncing back and forth between a horse show, but it was fun to march again in the parade and see all the people on the side of the road. It's amazing because as I drove up 15 minutes before it started, there was no one there. And to go down the streets and see them lined was fun to see, and all the kids waving and getting so excited. Missed the band. I heard a couple comments about the band this year. Not having the band playing was a little awkward, but you know, their reason is their reason. But that would be it for me for updates tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mike. Ray?
I would also like to congratulate you, Jesse, on becoming chairman. And
Thank you,
Chief, it was an honor to work under your leadership several years ago as a part-time police officer, and now I get another opportunity. And you know, I know you've been a lifelong resident. I know all the things. I know a lot of what you've done in town. So I look forward to working alongside of you on this board.
It's a pleasure to have you, Ray.
I appreciate that. As far as the Memorial Day parade, it was an honor. You know, I was a Boy Scout and all these things, and I walked in parades, but to participate in something, I don't know, it just felt so almost spiritual. It was an amazing event to see. You know, Jesse and I had a brief conversation recently about the faces in the crowd. It was something to stand there as part of, you know, the board, but to see these veterans and to see the folks in the crowd. Everybody was getting along, and you know, you hear all these crazy things on the news and all this craziness, you can get caught up in it. But when you're in a beautiful town like Sutton, and you participate in something like that, it really takes you to a different spot, and you realize how important community is, and the folks that you live next to and your neighbors and such. Whether you know them or not, people are waving, but they were all there for one thing: to honor our dead and honor our veterans. I have a son that served a year in Afghanistan, so this is near and dear to my heart. So I appreciate what the town did. Is this a point where I can bring up something for the roundtable?
Sure.
I was just wondering where we stand with the potential for a cell tower in town, and what direction, where's that going?
Jim?
Oh, I should have asked while she was here.
No, actually, I actually sent an email to John Arthur today, who's building Wireless Edge as the company, and they've agreed. We went out to bid and so forth, and they won the contract. And they've been going through the permitting process for Town Farm Road. I got an email back from him this morning. I sent an email to him this morning, and he said, we've got all the permits. I will notify you when we break ground, which should be very shortly. So it's happening.
Great.
We do have an antenna to place on the top of that as a repeater site for public safety.
Sure.
And so, it's interesting. The first question you raise is, the cell tower, which is appropriate. I think Mike Kenny raised that. The first question you raised. But it is finally happening. We went through, 5-6 years of continuing to give due diligence, 1 year due diligence extensions, and it was very frustrating for the board, but I do appreciate the board's patience. The market just wasn't available at that point in time, and so your patience will pay off, and we will have a cell tower there probably by this fall.
That's great. Douglas Road is a dead zone like a lot of other places. So
Yeah.
I think I asked for his number, too. If you wanted me to call him,
Yeah.
I said, sure, I'll give him a call.
Jim, I thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Ray. All right. Well, first off, I'd like to thank you all for your kind words. It is definitely an honor to sit in this seat at the head of this esteemed board, and obviously we have a lot of work to do this year, so I look forward to collaborating and moving things forward. Obviously, every second that we dedicate ourselves in this position, we're giving back to our community. So it's important to me, it's important to all of us, so I look forward to working together and, getting things done. I would like to congratulate Dave on his re-election. I would like to congratulate Ray on his election. Also, I would also like to thank Dave for bringing up the Memorial Day ceremony that took place before. This is the second year that we've had the opportunity, although this year we didn't get to ride on the bus, but we followed the bus. It was full. It was a short bus, but it was full, which speaks volumes. There was, I think, a higher attendance than there was last year, and we had a chance to go to all of the cemeteries in town. And like Dave, I had the opportunity to read the honor roll, as it is referred to. And the one thing that struck my attention, being a history professor geek, was the fact that you have names on that list that date back before we were these United States. We have people buried in this town that had fought in the French and Indian War. We had the War of Independence. We had the War of 1812, the Civil War. Every single major skirmish, battle, war that has occurred throughout our nation, our sons and daughters from Sutton have served with honor and distinction. So just being part of that ceremony to give recognition to what they did, it's Sutton. It really is. It speaks true. So obviously I'd like to thank Dave Carasiotis, the Dudley Gendron, the Women's Auxiliary, and everyone else involved in putting that event together because, again, it just gave me chills. That's for sure.
Never mind Deb Jakes and what she did.
Well, her name, believe it or not, is next because next after recognizing Dave Carasiotis is recognition to Debbie Jakes. Because the follow-up to that wonderful morning was the opportunity to walk in the parade. And Debbie, I know very well that would not have happened without the tireless effort that you put into it. So I know you don't really like getting public praise, but I'll do it anyway. So thank you very much, Deb. We appreciate it. I would also like to thank, I believe her name is Sarah Hicks, the young lady who filled in for Samantha Hicks, all right, who filled in for the fact that there was no band, which of course was a disappointment. There were some, outcry on the Sutton site, people that were disappointed, and even though there was a plan in place, it's, for whatever reason, it's just sad that it didn't happen. But the fact that Sam stepped up for the second year in a row and sung solo our national anthem, it was beautiful. So as I told her when she was done, we don't need no band. We have Samantha. So it was wonderful all around.
Just a point, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman, but I understood there was some issues with the band, and we sent some communication over to the band leader. That got to Ted Friend's notice. Ted Friend called me on Friday and said, you will have a band next year at the Memorial Day Parade, regardless of the weather. We will work to figure out contingencies. We will figure it out. But the town has done so much for the schools, and it's a real opportunity for the kids to march in this parade. So I really appreciated him stepping up and saying that. And so next year we'll have the band at our Memorial Day Parade.
Well, we should see if we can get Samantha as well. She can accompany the band.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that being said, I think we have that. I do have one quick update that I'd like to add because I spoke to Michelle down at the Senior Center in terms of the food pantry update. This past weekend was the monthly trip to the food pantry from St. Mark's, so I'd like to thank everyone who gave. We were able to fill more than a truckload of food that was brought down there. But despite the generosity of the town, there are 5 items that Michelle is looking for. The first is dish soap. The second is rice pilaf. The third is instant potatoes, sugar, and applesauce. And if I could, I'd like to remind the community that we're getting to summer vacation. And whenever Michelle comes before the board, she reminds the community that it's really during the summertime that the need of the food pantry is at its most. Because during the school year, the kiddos can go to school and they can get lunch, or some get breakfast. But during the summertime, it's now 3 meals that are going to be provided at home. So if you could, the next time you go down to the grocery store or Walmart or whatever, pick up a couple extra items and drop them off at the food pantry. I'm sure they'll definitely be appreciated.
Could I ask you for those items again?
Sure. We have dish soap, rice pilaf, instant potatoes, because let's not forget they don't have refrigeration, so instant potatoes, sugar, and applesauce.
Thank you.
Quite welcome. And I suppose I could also throw in the fact that Michelle usually asks for the low sugar alternative options for the kids. I have nothing else. I don't believe anyone else does. So if I could, I would like to request a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.